Right.
Right. Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming. So we are Real, and we are a Bay Area nonprofit that works to raise awareness of twice exceptionality and really help students thrive both at school and at home. And so we do that by putting on many parent events, and we also go to schools and we do work with educators and really trying to bridge that gap between home and school, everything in service of the 2E students in our lives. So just really briefly, in case you may not know the term twice exceptional, or you've just heard it and kind of new to the concept, twice exceptional students are students who have both like a distinguishing strength, a high ability or potential in one or more areas, and then simultaneously they've got some complex challenges. So we often talk about students who have dyslexia or ADHD or autism, but other twice exceptionalities could include oppositional defiant disorder, anxiety, etc. And these students are kind of experiencing both ends of the spectrum at the same time. And so it's kind of a helpful metaphor to consider them green. They've got a mix of their yellow strengths, their blue challenges, and they're their own unique child with their own unique needs. They can't be kind of addressed separately. I also just want to quickly draw your attention to our website, real2e.org. We've got a lot of information there. There's a new feature that we've just launched a few months ago called the 2E Topics tool, where you can find a whole bunch of resources. We've got a fact sheet that you can print out and hand to educators. We have some informational sheets about, like, is your child twice exceptional? We've got some great blog posts, and then all of our events that are recorded are then available on our website as well. So if you're not able to attend, or you found out about a past event, you can find those recordings and get that information as well.
And so you are the first to see our calendar for the next winter and spring of 2023. And one last event of this year. So we have a really interesting talk by a Real member whose child is going to attend college around video game design as a major. So if you think your child's wasting all their time playing video games, maybe not. And we have 3 different support groups. We have a bi-monthly support group hosted in conjunction with PHP, where we break out into rooms and you can meet other parents of 2E learners. We have an amazing person named Gil Gershoni joining us in February to talk about dyslexic design thinking and how neurodivergent brains have hyper abilities that should be looked at as strengths and not deficits. And then in March, we have Autism Level Up coming to speak about how we can best support neurodivergent children and how to change our thinking in terms of trying to fix children that are broken. In April, we have Andrea Wachter, who is pretty famous on Insight Timer, coming to speak to us about how to be mindful and how to manage our anxiety, which a lot of parents of 2E kids have in spades. And then we will round out the year with Dr. Tasha Oswald from Open Doors Therapy, talking about how to celebrate the child you have and how to take it easy on yourself and take care of yourself. And you can find all of these and RSVP for all of these on our website, real2e.org. And we also host a Google group for parents where you can ask and share resources and ask questions of other parents. We are also available on Facebook and Twitter, and all of our past recordings are available on YouTube.
We wanted to make sure to mention that we also offer educator workshops. You can read the very long list here, but we have about 13 workshops that we can provide either ourselves or in partnership with others. And we actually have seen more parents making these connections with their children's schools and introducing us to their schools so that we can really help expand educator understanding and awareness of twice exceptionality and how to work with these awesome and interesting kids. So please introduce us if you would like to bring us to your school. And I think So this is a new thing, and it's something I just want to be kind of upfront and honest and real, I guess, about, like, real. It makes me a little nervous to bring this up, but I think it's important to announce that we do have a fundraising campaign going on right now. I feel a little bit like the person on NPR who's like, call in, please help us meet our match. But we are just launching as a nonprofit this last summer. We just love bringing all the programming to our community. We are so bolstered by the comments of appreciation that we get for the work we do. And we really want to be able to continue it and build it and grow it. We know there are at least 9,000 twice exceptional children in Silicon Valley, and we currently are probably reaching about 1,000 families. So it's a lot of people we still aren't supporting that really are feeling lonely and lost and need our community support. We know there are about 35,000 educators in Silicon Valley, and we've probably had contact with maybe 1,000 if we're lucky. We're doing a lot of great work right now with schools. We're partnering with San Jose State University to help in the teacher prep program, but we really have a long way to go. And we can get there a lot faster with support from our community. You know, even if it's just considering what would you pay to come to an event like this and donating that each time you do something, if you're able. We really would love to keep our events free. We know that having a neurodivergent child puts a financial strain on families, so we don't want anyone to not be able to participate in our programs because they can't afford to pay to do so. But if it is something that you are able to do to support all the work we're doing, we would really appreciate it. And we do have a generous matching donation of $20,000 that we would like to reach as soon as possible. So if you can donate to us, we'd greatly appreciate it. And that is the end of my NPR speech on donating to REEL.
So our speaker tonight is Thea Slingland, and she's the Director of Ed Services at Learnfully. Taya's had 20 plus years of diverse teaching experience, including K through 6 gen ed teacher and being a K through 8 special ed teacher, and being the director of learning support at a private school, and also doing case management. And she takes great care to create highly engaging lesson plans and is an expert in motivating learners. Her areas of expertise include dyslexia, SEL, autism, online education, and executive functioning. And she joined Learnfully to take an active role in finding a better solution for education. Our children have big dreams, and it's up to us adults to help them build a staircase to their dreams by tapping into what interests and motivate them. So without further ado, I will give it over to Taya.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my share. Hold on. And see, hold on. Of course, you can see my screen. All right. First of all, I really appreciate the fact that we are reaching out, your program reaching out to all of the families and understand the matching campaign. So that excites me. So you'll be hearing from me shortly on that one. Working memory and the 2E learner. If you don't have a pen or pencil and a piece of paper, I encourage you to get one, because we will be doing a little simulation to kind of get you in the shoes of your learner for this. So our agenda for this evening, we're going to start with understanding working memory. I know we come from a broad spectrum of where you're coming into this. You know, some parents may be brand new, just receive that diagnosis and needs to kind of go, I know working memory is in here. What does that mean for my child? In the classroom, at home, you know, what steps should I be taking? And then some of us are further afield with that. So hopefully in this next hour or so, we'll kind of touch base on all levels of understanding of the working memory system. So we also will be doing, like I mentioned, a caregiver simulation, put you in the shoes of your learner, some possible indicators. If you're going, I have a feeling, or one of my kids has it, I might see this over here in one of my other kids. So let's look at some of those, some strategies that work. we do, working memory is one of those things that we can always grow upon. So we want to make sure we have some strategies with that. And then the last component, building self-advocacy and self-awareness. And that's something, obviously it changes with how we introduce it to different ages and stages, but we do want to grow on that every year because the goal is for them to develop some strategies that make them independent. So without further ado, so let's look at working memory. So working memory, just a quick definition of working memory. Working memory falls under the umbrella of the executive functioning. So some of you may have seen executive dysfunction or executive function issues on your IEP or on your neuropsych eval. It falls under that umbrella. Executive function, or we commonly refer to it as EF, is described as a conductor or a supervisor of our brain's self-management system. The EF is not in itself a diagnosis, but a dysfunction often considered as a comorbidity or a similarly present issue of several disorders. It's often considered with our learners with ADHD and autism. Growth for executive function is most rapid in the preschool ages, but it does continue to shape on through adolescence. Now, adolescence, it has kind of grown in scope as the way we have grown through the years in need. I always have heard, as we develop, it's based on need. That is how fast we go. So 26 is where adolescence is now considered to kind of be fully developed, but they do have some that go on into their early 30s. So I know that's a wide range, but that kind of gives you an idea that, when our kiddos go off to college, that executive function's not necessarily fully ready. So looking at working memory specifically as it falls into this, it's the ability to not only retain information or keep things in our head. It's the ability to manipulate the information and apply it as we actively incorporate new information. So it is considered a key element in our academic success. It allows us to do a myriad of things. One of them is to persist through challenges. So when something gets really difficult and they get bogged down, it allows them to kind of flexibly think and persist through. It allows you to follow directions, especially multiple step directions. So have you ever had, you give directions to your child and there's no chance that they didn't understand you. They understood you, but then they go off and they get caught in something else, or only one of the three things gets finished. That could be a possible working memory issue. It can focus on the ability to maintain focus. So it helps us to remember what is important. So when you're in a classroom, and you're saying, okay, Johnny, I need you to stay focused. Well, what are you focusing on? Instead of saying, Johnny, I need you to stay focused, Johnny, I need you to stay focused on me until I'm done talking. Or Johnny, I need you to stay focused on me until I'm done writing on the board. Or I need you to stay focused on this assignment until you have finished 1 through 5. See how we've changed instruction from this vague, I need you to stay focused, to focusing on that importance and providing some structure for that. Another thing with executive function can be seeing a task to completion. So for the same reason that multiple step issue may be difficult for them, if you have a very large project, being able to break it down into small chunks or knowing how to attack each section while you're keeping in mind what the teacher asked you to do can be very difficult. So that's where the strategies come in. I did notice in some of the questions is, why is my child getting frustrated? I don't understand, we're doing this. Why is my child getting frustrated? Well, think about when you have a memory system, you're trying to play a game. You're a board game or a game, a sports game outside. You have all this other stuff you're filtering out as far as, people are interacting with you, and you have a set of rules that you had practiced them, you're confident in them, and then people come in and they change those rules. That's going to be you can see where that could get frustrating. And it's not that they're hyper focused on the rules as much as, wait a minute, I just learned these, this is the rules, and you changed them. And so it sends that brain into a tailspin. Another example of that is to learn a new skill like reading. English language has a lot of rules, and just when you memorize them, they change them. So that when it comes into decoding or writing actively, you have to recall those rules as you're actively trying. When you're writing, you're actively trying to think of, okay, this is what I wanted to say. This is what the teacher wanted me to write. Oh, how did I spell that word? Oh, how do I decode that word? That's all working memory. You have to keep all of that going at the same time. So the other thing is group activity projects in the classroom. You have that student in the back going, well, how come they're very vocal outside? They have a lot to say. How come they're not participating in the project, or how come they're off task? Goes back to those rules. We have them all situated in, but it's changing as that, people are piling on different pieces to the puzzle, and you're trying to actively remember what the teacher wanted you to do while you're shifting with perspectives with your team. That can be very overwhelming. In going to, have you ever had a child who you worked really hard to finish that homework assignment? They get to the classroom and they don't turn it in. And you're like, wait a minute, I know they finished it. You have it in the folder. You went through the process, and the teacher's like, I even asked for it. Well, actively, that child is thinking of, what am I supposed to be focusing on? What am I supposed to have on my desk? Ooh, what's my friend doing over there? What's my teacher saying? You see how all those different inputs, they're having to focus those out in which one is going to be held in and which one is going to fall by the wayside. I know I'm supposed to behave in my desk right now. So that was a focus that was given to me. That's going to take precedence, maybe overturning in that homework assignment. So that can be your working memory in action, especially when you have that comorbidity of that ADHD, where, that filtering out external stimuli is difficult. Another thing is applying math. I have parents, why do we have to learn math facts? Math facts are so difficult. And for some of our learners, especially with some of the comorbid disabilities with them. So we have to think of, okay, yes, math facts allow us to build, that's that piece that you hold in your hand as you're learning long division. But some children really have difficulty acquiring math facts. That's where your strategy comes in. What can we do so that we're still staying up with the class and learning long division if the child doesn't have math facts? And that's why you see the accommodation of the charts, the number charts, or the different things. It's not to say that the child is not going to learn all the steps. It's just that we don't want to slow them down. These are bright kids that are going to be able to get a division, but we can't hold them up for something that we can create an accommodation for. So we're meeting those two sides. Especially when you have the 2E presentation, you have a child that's exceptional. They're very adept to looking at, oh, why is this kid able to do it? Why is this kid able to do it? So we want to be mindful of the strategies and giving them the tools that they need to succeed. hold on, I got to give my next thing here. Okay, so looking at, hold on, there it is. Looking at the memory systems is like one of the questions someone had sent us is, how is working memory different than the other memory systems? So when the sensory memories, we heard it, we saw it, if we're doing multisensory instruction, it could even be we touched it. What sensory system comes in, it brings it into our memory. That could be a couple seconds long. Well, then it goes to our short-term memory. How long, if I gave you a phone number, how long are you going to hold that phone number without doing something before you're going to forget that phone number? We have to be able to do something with it. Well, that's where the working memory comes in. So that's where you actively are using that information. Am I going to write it in my phone? Am I going to use my strategy, say it over myself several times? My husband does the whole, every time he shakes a hand, he says the name 5 times. That's how he remembers, or it makes some kind of wordplay on it. And he has this ability to remember everyone's name based on that. So that's where your working memory is. And that's where it goes from that holding it in short-term memory and tossing it into long-term retrieval. It's like that car that takes you between the two. It's that placeholder. So going from that, we look at, how is this, we talked about that umbrella system. How is executive function the precursor to learning? So you can see how it's really pulls them together: working memory, cognitive flexibility, inhibitory control. So cognitive flexibility is that, like I said, when we first started, is okay, how do we persist through challenges, right? Well, that means if you're going, okay, I have this problem solving technique, it's not working. What do I do? Do I just keep plowing through and hope for that to change? Or do I switch gears in that? And I think flexibly and try to think of a new way of solution. But that working memory ability to hold it and flexibly think kind of go together. And then we go into our inhibitory control. So our inhibitory control can be, how long do you hold it before you blurt out a question? You're in a classroom. Okay, I'm writing down, I'm all this, I'm doing fine until I'm not. All this stuff is coming in. And then you're like, wait a minute. And then you ask that question and the teacher's like, raise your hand. It's like, but, I need to process this. A lot of children will do that. And when that happens, it means that, hey, I need a moment for me to process before you continue. I'm doing this to stop you. But they're not always able to articulate. So that's one of those strategies where you're going, okay, I need you to slow down, or this is what I need from you. And that's the inhibitory control. Another inhibitory control is, okay, I can't interrupt. I've been told I can't interrupt, so I just fade off. I zone out. You have the child that's like, I have no idea how to put together all the things you just told me. And I'm just gonna come over here, or I'm gonna, do some way to get this out of my mind so I can have that moment to process. Another thing a child will do is they will do this all day, manage. They get in the car and they blow up. How many have had where they got in the car and they completely dysregulate? And I mean, they could be held together all day, and then they get in the car and you can hear them driving off the lot. It's because you are their safety. You are one. I've had more parents call me at 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night and go, in tears. Why? I've been in your classroom. They're fine all day. And it's because you're safe. It's the pot sitting in the slow boil in the back of the classroom. And then they boil over. So that's where the strategies come in, because, the emotional regulation is how someone emotionally responds in differing situations. So it's not to say that they're being difficult for you or they're being easy for them. It's just to say that they know socially they can't here. And they know you're going to love them no matter what. So that is, you know, how long can you hold it together until you can't? So that brings us to what's it going to be like for them? Well, the best way for you to understand your kiddo is to put your feet in their shoes. And this simulation, I still remember I did an autism certification we had to do in the state of California. You have to be an autism specialist, if you're an education specialist. So part of that training with the Orange County Department of Ed is you had to do simulations. And the simulations, I still remember, I've done it twice. I did 2 different programs. I did it through a university and I did the Orange County Department of Ed. I still remember my simulations of what it was like to be an autistic child in the classroom. And because it was that profound. So hopefully you get some feeling of what it was like for me, because, you know, it's been 10 plus years now, and I still can tell you that feeling. So simulation will create the level of anxiety your child has when all of this is coming through. So this is the part where we need you to have your paper and pencil ready. And we're going to go. So I am going to show you a slide. So let's go ahead. You will be shown cards for 5 seconds. Whoops, hold on. And you will try to remember all of the symbols as best you can, because you will be asked to answer some questions about them. So this is going to simulate what your child is facing in the classroom for 6 hours a day, when stuff is all new given to them and they're asked to repeat and to do something with them actively. Are we ready? All right, let's do this. Okay, so what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you write the symbols you saw in sequence. Okay. Ask yourself, did I use a strategy to help me? So that's one of the things that as adults, we have learned, whether we're aware of it or not, to compensate through the use of strategy. And that's what we are seeking to do with students, is to get their brains. It's not that you can't. It's that maybe you can't yet. We just need to find a strategy that works for you, but we're not done. Look at how did you do? We all have strengths and weaknesses in our cognitive abilities. We're going to do another one. So when I will tell you, when we start the school year, because of in the States, we have a long period of absence over the summer, correct? We have what's called kind of a period of review to kind of slowly and I'm sure you've all seen it, where that, oh, you know what, they're doing okay. They do, you know, it's that calm before the storms. August, September, they're kind of it's getting a little bit more difficult. We're doing okay. It goes up continually through December. Oh, things are getting a little hard. January, February, March. It's the design of our school system. In the classroom, the child may be struggling a little bit with this amount of material. Given the right amount of time to process it, they may be okay. They may feel like, you know what, I'm going to do okay. I answered that okay. Then what happens is we have to increase it. So let's try another one. Okay. Knowing and using those strategies, again, are a great way for us to use our strengths to bolster our weaknesses. Families are some of the questions that came through is, how do I know, if my kid's really exceptional, how do I know if working memory is really an issue? What your child is starting to build is compensatory strategies. And that's what we want. We want them to feel like, that full power of that ability they have. And we guide them toward that. And that compensatory strategy is, my guess is if I lined you all up, would be different for all of you. So can you still write all of those symbols down? The other question is, would you be able to do it backwards? That's working memory. What if I asked you to only do every third symbol? I'm applying new rules you weren't expecting. Would you be able to take them and then categorize them? This is what we ask students to do when they are learning their alphabet for the first time. When we are asking them to decode information that they have just acquired, we ask them to sing it forward. We ask them to put all of the vowels together, all of the consonants together, all the spelling patterns together. We're changing the rules. And if you have the right supports in the classroom, and we don't try to do it I think sometimes we have gotten so much information that even the teachers, I can hear they're talking really fast. And it's like, that's what we mean by chunking information. We're all in a hurry. Our society's in a hurry. We need to slow it down and give them a small piece of information at a time. And that's when that beautiful brain takes over and processes it. So if you have a child that's dysregulating, sometimes I always say behavior tells us serves a purpose. Sometimes that purpose is just to avoid. Why? Are we supporting them in the way that their brain works? And it may be a brain totally different than our own. So that is one of the things that we look at for working memory. Keep in mind, as 2E learners, there will be many things that they can do well. And they're going to have many curiosities, and there's going to be many passions. I know this because it runs in my family. But learning will be about finding the right strategies for them. So it's important to understand it's not that they can't learn. They can. We just need to make sure it's like, okay, you're going to go to work. You got to make sure you have all the right tools in your tool chest to do the job. Same for them. So one of the questions also that parents had asked was, how can a parent identify possible working memory issues? Anxiety and self-doubt are high when a smart child pins themselves against their peers. So when we're guiding them towards strategies and we're looking at possibly what's going on, we need to make sure that we're guiding them toward empowering them by sharing how their brain works. I think sometimes it becomes very easy for us to kind of go, oh, wait a minute, this is how it works for me. But, share that with them. But it's about self-discovery, and that's that individualization what we want. So empowering them is not just a series of can'ts, more a roadmap to success. So one of the biggest complaints I've had from kids over the years, I'm sure you've heard this, why? Why do I need to do this? Kids want to know why. Why am I working more than everyone else? Why am I doing tutoring? Why? I'm smart. If I'm so smart, why is this happening? These are questions. And sometimes instead of trying to avoid it, sometimes going through that process of self-discovery and showing them, how and not in why that how works for them is going through I notice you learn best when you do this. What do you think helped when you did this? Getting them into that mind of, you were successful here. What do you think you did differently? Getting that feedback, making it a series of questions of going, instead of well, you didn't do your homework. Why didn't you do your homework? Just how, it becomes why do you find it's difficult right now? What's challenging? Okay, I see that's challenging. What could we do? So getting them into that problem solving mode. Okay, I hear that I see you're frustrated. I see that. What do you think we should do? What would be a good step? It brings them into it, makes them start articulating, because that's the self-talk we want them to do. So that self-reflection breeds independence. Is a show, don't tell. And for instance, that one of the questions was presenting in front of a group. Ask what they're most concerned about. If you're concerned they have working memories, what are you concerned about? Students will say, I'm afraid I'm going to forget. I have them strategize. Okay, what do you think we could do? You have cue cards. I'm afraid I'm going to drop them, or I'm afraid I'm going to do. Okay, what can we do to not do that? We could practice. We could do one card at a time. We could have trigger words or trigger phrases, or even for artsy kids, some of my kids, they had trigger images. They drew a picture of what they wanted to say next. For them, that's how their brain worked. They avoid, but what you're seeking to do is avoiding overloading the system. So when we're looking at possibly identifying working memory issues, you kind of go through this process of self-discovery with them. So we look at, okay, what are some of the things that we notice? They have trouble following through, like we talked about. Trouble following through with directions, even if they're understood. Conversations are difficult and can be forgotten. Have you ever had that point when you had that conversation with your son? It's very clear in your memory, and they're like, yeah, I don't remember that. They're not, they're not being obtuse. They may have forgotten it, or at least the importance of it. They often are believed to have focusing issues. Children with working memory issues often look like they have an attentional issue. Sometimes it's a comorbidity. Sometimes it's that zoning out, and it's not truly an attention issue. It's just that they're trying to say, I need processing time. You've loaded up my screen, and I got the wheel of death going on in my brain. How many times I drives everyone crazy in my family, because I keep so many tabs open that I freeze my computer regularly. And, and that's basically what we're doing to our kids. We're giving them too much information and they're freezing. So if you really want to be heard, give them small snippets at a time. And as you're doing that, you're building stamina. That building of that stamina is what's going to get them to be able to do more and more and more. And if they have high levels of anxiety, which often comes with it, that building of that every time they have a comfortable experience, they're gonna trust and reach a little bit more. And that's what our goal is as educators and as parents and caregivers, is to build that stamina in a comforting environment. And that's going to help you right now. If they're getting easily frustrated or tired with mental tasks, that's because they're telling you, I don't know how to organize this in my brain so that all comes together. And that's what working memory is. It's all coming together. But if they're not organizing it, that's where you have, okay, working memory is tipped. What else in executive function is tipped? Is that organization and planning and self-monitoring? Are all of those tipped? That's where you have to give them, you have to see that link is, yes, it's showing up and really bogging down the working memory system. But what are we doing over here to make sure that this is fluid as possible? So if you're looking at, okay, my child has a very limited working memory system, make sure everything else in executive function is working in cohesion as well. And when we look at the writing is arduous and often avoided despite great ideas, give them the supports. They are having trouble. What in every, that's why we say graphic organizers. That's why we say, give them the vocabulary wall. Give them, if there's certain vocabulary words or academic words that are supposed to be in that, give them that section. Give them, help them go through these processes to create some semblance of success. Some of our children use templates. The templates are, I always say it's kind of like an educational Mad Libs, but it isn't. Education, that fluidity of writing sometimes starts by looking at mentor texts. Here is what it looks like successfully. Here, we're going to take out it. See, this is crafted under a structure. Some kids just intuitively understand that structure. Some actually physically need to see that structure. Build it out however you need it to allow that fluidity. Give them the academic language. Okay, which of these terms, if we're doing a transition word that's an addition word, furthermore, in addition, it's okay to give them those. Okay, which one works best in what you're trying to say? It gives them agency and freedom and independence so that they can become and do it on their own versus us constantly going, have you done this? Have you done this? And how many has ever gotten into that loop of, but have you done this? That's, mom 101, right? Remembering what is read. Remember, you're decoding, you're reading with fluency. You have all these different expectancies. You have words, wind, wind. Oh my gosh, they look the same, but you have to look at it in context to know which one it is being said. So there has to be stop gaps when you're reading. That's why we came up with annotation. How do we annotate in a way that is useful for this type of learner? For some of my kids, it was creating a template where they put in certain things. For some of my kids, it was drawing a picture at the end of every paragraph. Could I draw a good picture? Yep. Okay, then I'm ready to go. Could I not? No. Okay, get to the end of the chapter. Could I write a summary? Could I hit all the W's in there? So those stop gaps. Okay, so, and some of the other questions that we had looked at was for school, inability to remember to write down homework assignments for each class was one of the, what do I do with that? These kids, for our generation, it was write down your assignment notebook. And some kids, that still works well. but these kids were born in, especially where you're at, they look at us and they're like, you know what, I already have trouble writing. I don't want to write one more thing. We live in a digital age. There are a lot of apps on the phones or on their laptops or on the things to help them remember, especially if they're in middle school and high school. A lot of these schools have one-to-one iPads or one-to-one laptops. Once we moved into some of those helped to, especially if they're writing all this stuff or getting their homework assignments out, and if they forget to turn things in, if they have an Apple Watch that has a reminder, okay, the start of class, when that thing buzzes, that means it's time for me to turn in homework. And you have it set to the reminders at the start of each class. Digital reminders, if you're not allowed an Apple Watch, some schools don't allow it. Visual triggers, sticky notes. At the start of every notebook, they open it up, there's a sticky note to remind them. When they saw the sticky note, it was a visual trigger. So you would think the homework is, but sometimes it's not. So if they open up to certain things, create a visual trigger. And that's one of those things that you want the child to come up with what their visual trigger is, be it the Apple Watch, be it the Post-it note, be it whatever it is that you want. Is when they're middle school and high school, it becomes your kind of a guider, but you're not a teller. Directions are given at home, immediately does something different. Does that happen? You're giving a direction, and immediately kind of veers off. Clear directions with steps. I had one student that we literally had to get a dry erase marker and write them 1, 2, 3 onto their mirror in the morning. Every morning, the kid had to mentally go through the steps. And if there was anything changing in the day, that had to, okay, did you put it on your mirror? Yes. Okay. That was how it worked for him. Some kids do visual schedules. Some kids have something on their iPhone. It changes. But just keep in mind, too many tasks will create a decision paralysis. So that's the takeaway. If you have too much, they'll zone out and they'll freeze. Okay, so let's look at strategies my child can incorporate in accessing the strengths. Now, we always say making lists. The thing about coaching them with anything to do with executive function, I keep going back to, is you have to train them. These are kids that this is struggle for them. You have to practice making lists. So, okay, mom's going to go to the store. We're going to make a list. Get a piece of paper and pencil. Okay, what is something you see that we need? Let's open the fridge. What do you like to have in the morning? I like to have cereal. What do you need for your cereal? Well, I need cereal. Okay, let's go to look for the cereal. Oh, it looks like we need that. Where should we put that? Should put that on our list. You see how we're practicing making lists in small form and then slowly building that stamina up to generate more. Instead of when they go, okay, I have to do this, you're going to go back and you're going to practice all kinds of different lists. And anything that requires behavior modification, you need to do it for at least 2 weeks straight. You don't want to just do one list. Okay, we're ready to go. Go right, make a list. You're going to practice list making in a million different ways. And that goes with anything you incorporate. Making connections to new things. I have one student that I had, he was brilliant. The kid was a walking map in 2nd grade. I mean, it was amazing, but he had a very poor working memory. So what he did is he taught the teacher. You're greatest thing, the process of discussing something is going to be a powerful tool. So, okay, I need you to do this for me. Can you tell me what I need you to do? I need you to do that. You need me to do this. Okay, what does that look like? Or, okay, here is the math problem. Can you tell me how did your teacher show you? And if they're they're struggling with it and you have to pull up a YouTube, break it down into small steps. Okay. What did he do there? Why do you think he did that? Do you see how we're breaking it into steps, and he's having to teach you why everything's happening? And that process is going to be stronger. There's no stronger process than you teaching someone else. Breaking things down into small steps, you're going to teach them how to do that. And you're like, what? I mean, how many times have you go, okay, you're going to do this. We're the managers. Parents are managers of everything, but we're going to teach them how to break something down. So you get the project, it comes home. All right, let's get the calendar out. Let's get out the list. What are we going to do? Okay, it looks like you have these different tasks. Okay, let's look at the first one. Just the first one. We need to create a cover page. Okay, what do you think that means? What does that look like? What do we need for a cover page? Say this is a little person, so you need to draw something or what? Okay, how long do you think that's going to take you? See how we're breaking things down? Because that's going to be a strategy that child's going to use all the way through university, is breaking large tasks down into usable chunks. We take it from building strategy from little people to middle school. Okay, we got to study for this test. How are we going to break it down? You have to study for it for, this whole semester. Here's a unit test, or here's a chapter test, or here's what are we going to need to see. Everything is a breakdown process, and they're not intuitively going to do that. Another thing is memorization, working memory, right? What are some of the things that we can do as far as acronyms? We have one of our specialists is all about the acronyms. Mnemonics. How are we going to, like my husband say the name 5 times and then make a word play on it. That helps him remember those names. He goes through a room full of people. He met 15 people within the span of 30 minutes, and he can tell you everyone's name. That's the strategy that works for him. He's the king of lists. Mental math, build stamina. It seems counterintuitive. They're already struggling with it. It doesn't have to be up here. Start small and build it up. Word associations. Draw a visual representation of the task or word. There is a reason why we have that. That personally doesn't work with me, but that for some students, it works. So that's why we look at word associations in different ways. What works for that child? Some of my kids' visual representations, they didn't write anything down. They just drew a picture. And you asked them what it meant and how it connected. They understood. They knew how to build that bridge. Practice doing 2 to 3 steps on a sticky note. I had one child that had to have sticky notes in the corner of his desk. He'd take a sticky note out, and every time we gave steps, he created his little list of how to make steps, and he had to cross them off. And we practiced it. It's not like it just happened. We practiced it and practiced it and practiced it. And after reading, look at the notes that you wrote and then summarize based on the notes. I'm sure it sounds very familiar. It's Cornell notes, right? That's what we do. Another one is for children with working memory have trouble with sequencing. So they're reading a story and they can tell you bits and pieces of the story, but it might not be in sequence. And where that comes up is just reading comprehension. It can come up in history. It can come up in different aspects, but build a story with them. So you say a story every night, and you build on it. And I remember my husband did this with one of my little ones, and he had built it was every time there was a cat that crashed through the wall. For whatever reason, it made him giggle, but it made him come back for more. And he was waiting for the cat to crash through the window. And they would tell the story, and it was the same story built up over. And he basically taught him through stamina to build up a longer retell. So looking at I went crazy. Building up that stamina is going to be important for them. Okay. Now, talking with the teacher. Talking with a teacher for our middle school and high school, when they start looking, they come in, they got a class behind them, and it's difficult for them. I'm not going to lie. So it's not that they don't want the services or the accommodations. They do want that help. They just need some help in making that happen. So one of the things that we encourage is showing the child how to send an email to the teacher. Instead of like they missed a series of assignments, what should we do? Help them problem solve. Okay, I can see that you're missing this assignments. Instead of going into okay, you didn't do this, why didn't you do it? Let's go into solve. How are you going to solve that? Let them know that it's okay to let the teachers know ahead of time. Send them a note at the beginning of the semesters. We're working on our child's self-advocacy. When this happens, I'm going to send them to you. Just so you know, this is how this is going to play out. And usually the teachers will really welcome that. Review the accommodations with the child and what that means for them. Not just that they have them, but what it can do for them. It goes back to that strategy. And as they get more adept at it, I know children are invited to IEPs, prepare them for it. See, we're going to go over your strategies here. What do you find? Here's the ones you've had before. Which ones did you find most helpful? What do you feel still is an issue? Okay, let's problem solve. What do you think we could do to make that more attainable for you? See, it becomes more about independence and bringing them into the conversation. They're more adept to do something when they're part of that conversation as an active participant, not just physically there. Does that make sense? Now with guidance, that practice, even with the email, can take time. It's not like it's all of a sudden you're going to sit there. Okay, it's time to write our teacher. Okay, let's go through the process of an email. What goes in the subject line? What are we asking them for? Okay, this is the subject. Did we respectfully ask a question? What do you want to happen here? And if your child has been given extra time and they have a 0, that extra time is something that's allotted to them. So if you can say, we have finished this, we respectfully ask for you to grade it, or we've relooked at this. Those are some of the things that is going to follow them as they go through high school and into university. We want to establish those patterns. And then going back to, just like we did with the homework, brainstorm reminders. How are you going to remember to do this? Make them part of that discussion. So someone had asked me this: what was one piece of advice for caregivers whose children face these challenges? And I actually took this back to my team because it was one of those things that I wanted to see what everyone stand was. And the basic was kind of the nuance of what we just discussed is don't jump in and try to fix it. And that's going to be so hard. Because if we jump in and try to fix it, you take away the independence and they will take back seat to their education. Instead, help them find strategies through self-discovery. Go through and be willing to practice with them, be willing to, okay, this is the problem I'm having. Okay, let's discuss what are possible ways. Obviously, you're going to have in the back of your brain some of the things that you're going to guide them toward, but you still want them to be part of that discussion. You don't want to just go, okay, no, I need you to do this now. I need you to do this, because that's when especially when they hit high school, they're going to resist. They will, and know that they will make mistakes. We all make mistakes. They're going to make mistakes often. And in fact, this came up in our team meeting. We're in the middle of Colorado right now in a team meeting, and it went around our table. Fail is the first attempt in learning. It is, if we look at the scientific process, you create a hypothesis and you have to test it. We test and test and test. So if we want them to get into just into that mode of, you know what? Yes, I failed, but I'm going to persevere. Yes, I may have failed, but I'm going to use that as a catalyst to learn. And next time I study, I'm going to study better. That, in fact, one of our training modules, we do boot camps for executive function. And one of the things is we do case studies with the kids. And it was like, okay, we had 2 kids. Both of them had very fixed mindsets. One thought, I am the best gosh darn math student there is. And one thought, I am never going to pass math no matter what I did. What was different? They both did equitably on the first test once, and then the second one, they both kind of bombed. And what happened? How did they change that pattern? Well, one had learned through coaching that, okay, you know what? I did not do well in this, but I know that maybe this studying wasn't work. What can I do? I can see my teacher. Okay, I can study with this person who seems to understand it well. Okay, I can practice with my mom. Went through all the thing. Whereas the other one said, you know what? I am so good at math. I'm waiting till the next chapter. I don't need to redo. Everyone did bad. If I did bad, everyone did bad. Then you could see the 2 results. The kid that had originally been, not real good at math had taken off. And the one that had gotten fixed and said, you know what? So it's about building that stamina for them. But it's going to take lots of practice to get it right. Offer more suggestions but questions than immediate solutions. You don't want to be the solution for them. You want to be the comfort way to guide, but not to make that solution. And then ask them what could help, what you could do to help, and offer 2 to 3 strategies if they really get stuck. So you see, they still have to make a choice, and they still have to create the independence. So that's what I had. I understand we have some questions, so I'll stop this share and I'll look at a lot of faces.
Thanks, Taya. We actually got a lot of questions in the chat. So one of the ones that several people said was that their child had a good working memory score in their IQ test, but they're still noticing all these challenges that you're mentioning. Okay.
Then I go back to the comorbidity of the executive function. And the reason being is that because of the intertwining, what happens is if there's dysfunction in some of the other areas, is they rely on that strength of the working memory, and it bogs down, like the too many windows opened up. So for instance, I've had children that have robust working memories, but they were really had poor strategy as far as organization and planning and self-monitoring. And because that, they had to hold more in the working memory system to compensate for those weaknesses. So by going back and strengthening and bolstering some of those, then they were freeing up that working memory system.
That makes a lot of sense.
I wanted to ask actually a question that came in, I think, through several of the folks' questions is really, could you just like give kind of like a snapshot of like, you had that great slide that had different ways that if you have a working memory challenge, it might express itself, but how do you see it change through time? Like if you walk like from having a 6-year-old with working memory issues, then to a middle schooler, then to a high schooler, like, does it change? Does it look different? Or really, are you seeing the same things?
That is a great question. Keep in mind that it's like with anything, our cognitive profiles, we're learning there's a lot more cognitive flexibility. There's a lot more neuroplasticity than we once believed. So that's why we say by making the kids from the young age, obviously making it age appropriate, we want to build that stamina. We want to make them aware of the different strategies so that, like, for instance, the overcompensating with using the working memory for the other ones that were dysfunctional, but by using and creating strategies that work for them, it will look different, because they will be able to persevere. It won't be as apparent. Now, it's not going to go away because we all have innate strengths and weaknesses in all of our cognitive profiles. We are just basically using our profiles for our advantage, if that makes sense. And that's, you have that beautiful blessing of the 2E, and that means you have a lot to pull on as far as is bolstering that weakness of the working memory system. So what I would suggest is just going in and make them part of that process. And truthfully, when you have a very highly intelligent child, making them part of that process. I have 2 at home, and whenever I try to mommy them, it doesn't work. They want to have some agency. So the sooner you bring that up, it will start looking a little bit different. Absolutely.
And
well, I guess I was wondering too, like, how then do you or your child talk about working memory challenges with educators, and also understand, like, educators feel a lot of pressure to cover a lot of content standards. They how do you both help educators come on board with what the challenges are, but also, be understanding of the challenges the educator also faces in terms of what they need to do?
That is a great, and I, as an educator myself, I highly respect that comment, because they do have a lot on their plate. They had a lot on their plate before the pandemic. Now it's just, wow. Sometimes it can be as simple as, I had one parent, and I'm going to tell you some of the things that I remember, wrote a note to me. And it was the loveliest little note of, let me introduce you to my beautiful child. And this is how my child learns best. This is, if you have any, this is a little article. I'd love for you, if you had a moment, to read. If you haven't, I'm going to give you a week. And if you don't mind, I'm going to contact you in case you have any questions. And you know what? I really appreciated that. I really did. And not just because she put a little chocolate cookie on it, although I did remember that quite well too. But keep in mind that we do go into education because we do want these children to succeed, and we are human beings. And sometimes it's not that we don't want to, it's just, if you come into it with the respect you just mentioned, I think it's going to be well received. That was one way I know. As far as when they get to middle school and high school, I am a big proponent of the child writing that letter. It could be in an email, it can be in however that child wants to do. Let me introduce you to me and how I learn best. And, this, in writing that letter, I would make it a whole project of, what do you want them to know? How do you, because it can be a real catharsis for them. And maybe as far as lowering the anxiety or lowering, expectations of, they're not going to know. It gives them that agency. So that is one thing I would do as far as conveying that. Another thing is going back to the littles is I always brought my littles to the conference and we would practice. And I would say, okay, we had this, but I'm going to bring my child in here for 3 minutes. And he has something he would like to say to you. And we would practice. It's not like I'd bring him in cold. And they would say, this is what I want you to know about me, or this is, something. In any time we build that as part of them as they go up, they do pick it up.
That's awesome. So one person said that her daughter has a very good ability to memorize, but she has working memory and EF challenges. Is there any way you can think of to use her strength in memorization to be used as an accommodation? She can't seem to get through 2 to 3 step directions, and she's 12.
That would be in that does happen. So that would be where we would strategize the process. And I can say this for myself, I have to write it down. I don't necessarily have to read it again. I have to write it down. And, it was one of those things as I went through my own journey, and I've, gone through a few years of school. And that's what I would create with that child is, okay, you have a beautiful memory system, but as something's coming in, you have to combine that with new information. And that's the working memory. So they have that long-term retrieval, but their short-term memory might not be as strong. So that's where they would need to write it down so that they have something. Okay, the memory's in here. What I need is right here on the paper. And then I can combine them without overworking my working memory.
I learned a new thing tonight about how the different memories work together. I love it. Any tips for getting teens to be willing to use their accommodations? It seems like you need accommodations to address working memory challenges. Have you seen anything work to help kids embrace the purpose of the accommodations?
I really go back to kind of what we had discussed in this is that children, especially when they get into teens, developmentally, they're fine-tuned to separate from us. So as far as is getting them to self-advocate, they have to be part of that decision-making process. They have to be part of the creation of those accommodations. They're part of the execution of those accommodations. The more agency they have over it, the better chance you're going to get them to do them. But if you go, okay, we were in this team over here while you were at school one day, here's your list of accommodations they say you really need, you're not going to get a team to listen. So that's the part where, you would sit down and go, and if it's already happened, I mean, obviously it's already happened, you can go, okay, we're going to sit down here and I want you, let's look at what we got here. Why do you think we have this? Where do you think you could use this? Let's focus on the ones. I want you to highlight the ones you think you might need. Okay, it's so if they're having trouble turning stuff in, be there with, okay, let's look at the list here. Which one of these might have helped you in that situation?
I like the involving them in everything. I think that's a great strategy.
Well, we want, keep in mind, they're with us for how many years, and then they go off into life. That working memory is always going to be there. We don't want to inhibit, these are brilliant children. We don't want to inhibit them from meeting their goals, they're going to have their own hopes and dreams and wishes. And, we don't want anything that's going to limit that. So our goal is to help them figure out, okay, how are you going to get to that dream? Let's figure that out.
And a question just popped into the chat, which I think is very apropos, which is for children in elementary school who are just starting to learn about their needs, so they're not quite able to self-advocate yet. What are some strategies to help them see that this is a challenge they're having in the moment and then realize they need to put a strategy into action?
That's a great question. It's keeping in mind as they're little, we do start executive function with little ones. Sometimes executive function games are about building stamina. And it's just about, it can be, we have cognitive motor exercises. I don't know if you ever remember doing rhythm, how you tapped on the table and you snapped and stuff. That was actually a game to build higher level cognitive focus and other things. So teaching them what those mean, answering the why, even if they don't necessarily fully conceptualize, starting to answer those why questions really help them start filling in the gaps. I remember my kid up until about 10. Now he's 17 now, so I kind of miss it. It was always, why does that happen? Well, why does this? I mean, they are just magpies of the world, looking at how the world fits into place. Your job is to slowly fill that in, help them understand the whys. And it might be, I noticed you're having a little trouble with decoding. This is going to help you with decoding. Let's practice this and see how this helps you. And then have that. What do you think that did? Do you notice any difference? Giving them that, giving them feedback and then also eliciting that feedback pulls them in. And then you become a cohort in their education.
And one thing I've done is I've told my kids' teachers in elementary school, please, if they ask you for something, give them something. Even if you can't give them exactly, they said, I need a 20-minute break right now. Give them a 2-minute break, give them something, because then you're rewarding that they self-advocated, they'll do it again.
Oh gosh, yes, thank you. I love that. Thank you. They might not be able to, that's right. They might not be able to fully articulate. So it goes back to behavior serves a purpose, and you're starting to slowly reward the behavior, the positive feedback.
Well, I think what we find too is there's a lot of emphasis in schools about self-advocacy, but there's no structure for teaching it. There's not a scaffolding system, right?
Agreed.
And there's not a curriculum that teaches self-advocacy, and our educators,
we're working on it.
Our educators that don't get trained in how to support self-advocacy or what it might look like at different ages and stages, or and how that might be different for a neurodivergent child, right? Or someone with social communication challenges, or all these different things, and so that's why I always love Yael's advice, because it really says to the teacher, like, you can be part of helping this child learn self-advocacy. It doesn't mean you have to give them everything they want, but you be part of the process of helping them along the way to know that this is a positive experience, that talking to your teacher is not scary.
No, and they watch you.
Yeah.
How you respond to them at home, even if they look like they're busy doing something else, they watch to see how your response is to the teacher. And I have to pull on Kelly with some of the things that you had said is, how we talk about the feedback. You had mentioned kind of feedback for the teacher. Looping back your earlier question, that is a beautiful way to give the teacher feedback as far as is the self-advocacy, because you're right, we're not trained. There's one of those things that I had to go and get supplemental training. My team had to go and get supplemental training. So it's one of those things we're seeking through this and through our own program here to push out to the schools and to push out to educators in a way that is viable, that we can pull all these groups together. Because I think parents, no one knows their child more than you do. And by creating that circle of understanding, there's nothing more powerful for that child.
What I would definitely like to acknowledge, because I think one of my kids' teachers is on here tonight, that the high school she goes to actually does a really good job with this. It's the only school I've seen that really does. Like, they have a whole plan, 9th through 12th grade, what will self-advocacy look like at each grade? How will we support it? How will we get them to be independent in that by the time they're an late 11th, 12th grader? And it's just beautiful.
That is beautiful.
It is. We did have another question that came in about, we've had a couple specific questions, which I think are really pertinent. I don't want to lose them and we're going to run out of time. But in high school, if you can't remember steps, but you also can't take notes fast enough. So when working, there are a couple of specific scenarios that I think I'd like to pose before we wrap up for tonight. So like, one of these is like note taking. That is a really hard thing for someone with working memory and other executive function challenges to do. Am I looking at the board? Am I listening? Am I writing? And then am I remembering what? Right. Like, so I don't know what strategies you might have around that. And then I have 2 other topics after you've answered that. So this is kind of like speed strategies, maybe.
Speed strategy. Well, that goes into the accommodation of the note taking, where they have the note outline from the teachers. So it would go into, okay, where you would strategize with the student. I notice you're not taking notes. Why are you, well, I feel like I should listen because I can't write down fast enough. So that could be where the teacher gives the outline or gives keywords or anchor words on the board for the child to start an outline for themselves. And then they can, they know what cue words to start grabbing.
I think that's actually been really helpful for my daughter, who doesn't have, for other things too. She doesn't have working memory issues, but she has
Processing.
Auditory processing challenges, which make it very difficult. So these solutions are great for a number of things, not just working memory. And I think, one of the other questions, then the next speed round topic was around social settings. So maybe there's a child who really does well on these working memory tests in terms of cognitive skills, but they really have the challenge in social situations and interactions. Do you see that? Like, what's that all about? And what are some strategies for that?
Well, there's a couple different reasons why, even if the working memory isn't a significant area of weakness, where if we look at the whole cognitive profile, for instance, someone that has auditory processing, you put them in a social situation where you got multiple people talking at once, and let's face it, the classroom is a big social situation. You got people switching outside the hallways, you got the gardener outside, you got desks and stuff move. Your brain is filtering all of that out. And so there is, what is the focus? So a main thing is what is the agenda? I had a student that we had taught him to come in. What is my agenda for today? Or what is my essential question for today? Or what is, basically what is the cue? It allows them to put down. Now, going into the social situation, as far as like a group with the kids, is when they're trying to take in everyone's conversation, that will be more difficult than if they focus in on one. So that's the cueing. Anytime where they have to filter multiple things is going to drain that ability to attend.
I think I'm thinking about this, and this might be more of a long-term memory thing, which is the memory palace strategy. Because I know, like, one of the things that can be hard for these kids could be like remembering people's names. Like you could, like, how do I keep these names in my memory and draw upon them and use them? And that is very challenging for a lot of kids. And so there's that concept of the memory palace, where like you might like think of that name and attach a color to it, or attach an animal to it or some beyond the mnemonic device or beyond, right? Like it's just another strategy that I don't know, but is that more long-term memory or does that work with?
That is a beautiful term. It's the same thing. Like I said, with my husband he struggles with it. So he has to say it 5 times and then he rhymes it with something, or rhymes it with something or puts it with some memory system that he knows. So you're right. It goes beyond just a simple device. It's just basically, he knows he has to say it at least 5 times and he has to attach it to something. And that's basically using, putting it on a memory hook.
Well, as you're talking about your husband too, that makes me think a lot about how sharing our own strategies, like for these things with our kids, like making that visible, right? Making our own strategies verbal and visible to our children, because you can have working memory challenges or not, and you still will have some things that hang you up. So I think just being able to share, this is why I make a list. This is what like your husband sharing, these are the 5 ways I remember someone's name, like then that normalizes it and also makes it less mysterious. So
exactly. I love that. That is a beautiful way of putting it. Is basically showing your own vulnerabilities. And anytime, we want children to be vulnerable with us, but we first have to be vulnerable to them in some capacity.
Yeah. Yeah. So the last question I think we're going to get in is another topical one, like it was around weak verbal working memory. So we talked about social, we talked about some of these other weaknesses, but what if it's verbal working memory? Does that mean it's hard for them to follow along when a teacher is teaching only new material orally? Like, is that then like something you would see orally? And especially challenging maybe if it's a child who's dyslexic, because
verbal memory
will also be difficult. So.
Verbal memory can be you're basically we have the visual and the verbal memory. You have think of your words versus your images. So, yes, it could absolutely be under the guise of dyslexic, but it's not an all-encompassing thing. Yeah. So when we look at verbal memory, remember I had mentioned, okay, we might have to look at creating a visual cue to assist us with that. So basically it goes down to using those strengths to bolster those weaknesses. So it used to be, okay, we're just going to keep tacking those weaknesses, but it isn't, because the child does have strengths. We just need to make sure, and that also is going to empower them, because they like, no, I'm good here. I'm going to use this to push this up. It's kind of like me with writing stuff down.
Yeah. Well, what might that look like for a middle or high school student, right? Like when it's things have gotten more complicated, the work is more complicated, the concepts are trickier.
So I had for one of my kids, we had to, for instance, we had a story, and again, that sequential was difficult. So he took a piece of register tape and he drew images out in sequence, basically then they were out of order. So we had to clip them and then, okay, let's look at putting them into order. So in that registered tape could be as he's going, that annotated notes could be through with Post-it notes. You have to, it goes back to teaching them to break it down and then build it back up. So if they're struggling with something that is that larger scale, especially with the depth and complexity, we have to teach them to break it down. And by us breaking it down, that's great, but then they go to the next class and maybe that teacher doesn't do it. So we want them to carry things through as we go.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I would say like, that's a key thing I'm taking away from what you've talked about tonight. A couple of key things are really like helping them learn how to break things down, helping them learn to do that, and then helping them like really, really focusing on the why of things and really helping them see the why of things and talking to their teachers and letting them be part of the solution.
And I love how you said, bringing in your stories, your whys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because that connects you to the child.
And it sounds like also for me, I took away that although working memory may not improve, you learn these strategies. And so ultimately you'll be in a situation where it appears to be improved because you found compensatory strategies. Thank you so much.
No problem.
I learned a lot. I'm sure our audience did as well. And we really appreciate you joining us tonight. Thank you everyone who joined. And don't forget that you can go to Reel. We can put Taya's information and Reel's information. We're getting a lot of thank yous. It was very thought-provoking and things like that in the chat. And so you can visit Learnfully to get services like the things that Taya is discovering, talking about. She can help teach your child, or her staff can help teach your child these kind of strategies. And you can come to Reel for more events, more information, more things, handouts you can give your teachers about what it means to have a TUI child. And we even have a pre-recorded session about how to create one of those intro to my child letters at the beginning of the year. So thank you everyone so much.
Thank you.